Jake here for Extreme Terrain, and today I'm taking a look at the Mammoth 2-inch front leveling kit fitting 2003 and newer 4Runners. If you want to get a cooler, beefier stance on your 4Runner without having to spend a bunch of money to do it, then this leveling kit from Mammoth Off-Road is going to be exactly what you're looking for. Now, most trucks come from the factory with a bit of a forward rake to them, and the 4Runner is not immune to this. If you're not familiar with the term, rake refers to the angle at which the vehicle sits. So if you're looking at it from the side, you'll notice that the front end tends to sit a bit lower than the rear. Now, the newer gens especially sit nearly 2 inches lower in the front versus what they do in the rear. Some might like that look, but if you're looking to do any type of off-roading, or if you want to add some beefier wheels and tires without going whole hog on a lift kit, something like this is going to be the right option for you. Now, this kit is going to give you the clearance you need to run up to 31-inch tires on your truck without any issues or other modifications. Now, you can get some pretty aggressive 31s on there if you stick to that size. Now, squeezing some smaller 33s or some 32s on there may also be possible, but if you really want to upsize like that, you're going to need to plan on doing other mods or just flat out going with a larger lift. So for that reason, 31-inch tires are going to be our recommended size for this setup. So what we have here is a pair of spacers. And the spacers themselves are going to measure about 1 inch in actual height. Now, that might seem a little bit odd, but it's important to remember that suspension lifts, especially these spacers, are not a 1-to-1 ratio. So the height of this spacer doesn't necessarily correspond to exactly how much lift you're going to get. All has to do with suspension geometry, but these are still going to give you that 2 inches of lift in the front of your truck. So these are going to bolt right on top of your stock struts, and then those struts and with the spacer are going to bolt right back into their factory position. So it's going to give you that lift to your front suspension, and it's also going to end up leveling out the stance of the truck. Now, raising the front end will result in a better approach angle and better ground clearance overall. Might not be a whole lot, but it's going to make a bit of a difference. Now, the other nice part about going with a spacer lift is this isn't going to have a negative impact on your ride quality. Now, you might notice things being a little bit stiffer just because you are moving the suspension up a little bit, but since you're keeping your factory springs and shocks, you're not modifying anything in the rear either with this kit, ride quality is going to remain pretty much unchanged. Spacers are a pretty simple thing, but it's important that they are done right. Now, these are made from CNC machined aircraft grade billet aluminum, and they've been anodized black to help keep everything protected from rust and corrosion. So there's no actual coating on these. This is the color of the metal now because of that anodization process. And unlike polyurethane spacers, these metal ones are much less likely to wear out. And since these are milled from one solid piece, there's no bends, no cracks, no seams or anything in here, so there's really no weak points to them. So they're gonna stand up much better to abuse. Now, that's also good news for you if you plan to take your truck off-road, because you're not gonna have to worry about these being a weak point. Now, pricing for the kit comes in at about $75, which is pretty inexpensive even for a spacer lift. Now, you could spend more money to get yourself more height, but if you want a simple, effective leveling solution that's going to maintain your stock shocks and stock ride quality, you really can't go wrong with this setup here. Installation will come in at a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and it should take you about 3 hours to get this job done. Now, this is going to require moving some bits out of the wheel, dropping your strut to gain access, but overall, it's not a hard process. Really, these just bolt right on, and then you're going to use the included hardware as your new top mounting bolts and bolt everything right back in the stock position. Just remember that once you do have everything bolted back together, you should plan on getting an alignment done in pretty short order, since you are going to be changing around the suspension geometry, so things might be a little out of whack. But other than that, pretty straightforward. So why don't we jump on out to the install bay and we'll show you how to get these installed on your 4Runner.
Tools required for this install include an impact gun, an air gun, a ratchet, an extension, needle nose pliers, 10, 12, 14, and 18 millimeter sockets, a 19 millimeter swivel socket, a hammer, a 19 millimeter wrench, a 14 and 16 millimeter ratcheting wrench, a pry bar, and pole jacks or jack stands.
What's up, guys? Today we're installing a leveling kit on our 4Runner, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is disconnect our brake line brackets. The one on the upper control arm is a 10 millimeter bolt, whereas the one in the knuckle is a 12. So I've got my 10 millimeter socket to start on the upper control arm, so let's get that out. So first we'll get our upper control arm bracket. So we'll take that 10 millimeter socket to remove this bolt. Then we can pop our bracket out of the way, throw our bolt back, and then we'll switch to our 12 millimeter socket for the brake line bracket and our knuckle. And then same thing, pop that out of the way and thread our bolt back in. Next, we can remove the 18mm nut holding our sway bar end link in. So we'll grab an 18mm socket to pop that off. Next, we can disconnect our tie rod end. So we'll grab a pair of needle nose pliers to bend back our cotter pin. Next, we can take our 19mm socket to remove our nut. Next, we can grab a hammer to tap on the side of the knuckle here to break our ball joint free. Now, once we get this to pop free, we can remove our nut and get our tie rod end off to the side. Next, we can loosen up our lower strut mount. So we'll grab a 19mm socket for our nut side and a 19mm wrench for our bolt side to loosen that up. Next, we can disconnect our upper control arm ball joint from our knuckle. So we'll grab a pair of needle nose pliers for our cotter pin, and then we can grab our 19mm socket to loosen up our nut. And now with our nut loosened up, we can do the same thing where we're smacking the side of the knuckle. Make sure you leave that nut on so your whole knuckle doesn't go flying once it pops free. And then we'll just pull down on our upper control arm and fully remove our castle nut. Next, we can come to the top of our strut tower and remove our 3 nuts. So we'll take a 14mm ratcheting wrench to do so. I'm going to end up leaving this nut on there hand tight until we're ready to remove our strut. Now at this point, you can repeat that entire process on the other side because we do need to be able to move our sway bar to get our strut out. Next, we can remove our lower strut bolt. And then we can go back up top and remove that nut. And then we can pull our sway bar up and out of the way. And then once you have your strut out on one side, you can do that same thing on the other side. So now with our strut removed from the 4Runner, we can install our new spacer. We're just gonna slide this onto the studs of our strut, reinstall our 3 nuts and tighten them down. And then we have studs that are going to be coming from the top of the strut tower into our spacer to secure it to the vehicle. So now we can grab our spacer. Our studs are evenly spaced out, so there's no wrong way to put this on. And then we'll thread on our factory nuts. And then we'll take our 14mm socket to tighten those down. And now we can do that same thing for our other strut and get these back in the 4Runner. So now we can reinstall our strut onto the car. We have our bolt with a lock washer and a flat washer that's going to be going through the top of the strut tower and into our spacer. So we'll lift up on the sway bar. Slide that in. And then we can get our bolt started. Next, we can reinstall our lower strut bolt. So I'm just gonna get a pry bar right in here under the stud. And then on the other side, we can install our washer, as well as our nut. So now once you have your strut installed on one side, you're gonna wanna install your other strut on the other side before you start putting everything back together.
because once you have your knuckle reconnected to your upper control arm, you won't be able to swing your sway bar up out of the way to get your strut in. Next, we can reconnect our knuckle to our upper control arm ball joint. Now, you might want an extra set of hands for this to help you pry down on the upper control arm to connect it to the knuckle. Now, we're gonna pull up on the sway bar first to get that over the axle, and then we can raise our knuckle back up. We'll have our buddy help pry it down, and then we can get our nut on. So now, once you have your buddy, you can lift up on your sway bar and get your knuckle into place. And then get your nut onto the stud. So now we can grab our 19mm socket to tighten up our castle nut. So now once you have this tightened down and the hole in your stud lining up with the slat in your castle nut, you can install your cotter pin. If it doesn't quite line up, you're gonna wanna make sure you tighten it and never loosen to get it to line up. And then we'll just slide our pin through, just like that. Next, we can tighten down our lower strut bolt. So we'll grab a 19mm wrench on the bolt side and a 19mm socket on the nut side and tighten this down. Next, we can reconnect our tie rod end. You might have to raise up on your lower control arm a little bit to get that into place. And then we can reinstall our castle nut. We'll take our 19mm socket to tighten that down. Now, once we have that hole lined up, we can reinstall our cotter pin. Next, we can reinstall our sway bar end link. So we'll get that into the hole and then use a pry bar to pry up on our sway bar to get our end link through. And then we can throw our nut on. While we're here, we can reconnect our brake line and ABS brackets. And then we'll take our 18mm socket for a sway bar end link. And then our 10mm socket for our ABS bracket. And a 12mm socket for our brake line bracket. Next, we can come back up to the top of our strut tower and tighten down our 3 16mm bolts. So we'll grab a 16mm ratcheting wrench to do so. So now once you have everything buttoned up on this side, you can repeat that same process on the other side. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the Mammoth 2-inch front leveling kit for your 2003 and newer 4Runner. Thank you for watching, and for all things 4Runner, keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.